Good evening, all of you. A very hearty welcome to our answer writing improvement program. As I told yesterday that answer writing improvement program on YouTube channel of Nishchay IS is continuously being taken by Yaswant sir. So that is in Hindi. Answer writing improvement program is continuously being taken by Yaswant sir on our YouTube channel, that is in Hindi. From yesterday, we have started answer writing improvement program in English medium also, and I will be taking that class. Daily we will discuss one question from Monday to Friday related to current affairs and issues of contemporary importance. And one case study will also be discussed most probably on Monday and Tuesdays, as yesterday we had a case study on an important current issue. So today's question is related to COP Conference of Parties, which is organized under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So let us see this question. As we know that COP 27, Conference of Parties 27, is scheduled to be held in Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. There is a city in Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh. So the 27th Conference of Party of UNFCCC is scheduled to be organized between 6th to 18th November, means in the coming days. So let us see that how questions related to international agencies, bodies, environmental agencies, which form part of paper 2 as well as paper 3 of general studies. So this question, it may be associated with international institutions as well as it can be associated with the environment topic of the paper 3. So let us see the question. Discuss the key takeaways from the previous Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. Okay? So you have to discuss the key achievements or the key takeaways which came out of such Conference of Parties organized by UNFCCC. This is the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, critically discuss India's contribution in the COPs in the last decade. So the second sub part of the question is more specific. It gives you a certain timeline and asks India's contribution in Conference of Parties in the last decade. Okay, so the question is quite simple and specific, and nowadays you can see there is an increasing tendency in UPSC to ask specific questions with regard to international agencies and institutions also. Other than that, India's stand, India's contribution, or what was the India's objectives. So all these things have been consistently appearing in recent years as far as UPSC civil services main exam is concerned. So how to approach this question? Now as we know that this question is divided into two parts and the word limit is 250 words. So as I also discussed yesterday, introduction and conclusion, they both comprise 10% of the word limit. So we are left with almost 200 words to frame the main body of the answer. Again, it is very important to remind that introduction and conclusion are not something separate from the answer. From the very word go, from the very first word of your answer in the introduction, you should directly address the question. Okay, you should directly address the question. In conclusion also, your particular focus should be on the overall demand of the question. So how to write introduction to this question? There can be multiple ways to start this answer. Now, there are certain important terms in this question. For example, Conference of Parties, okay, COPs. So Conference of Parties, you can start by defining what is Conference of Parties held by UNFCCC. Second thing is UNFCCC itself. So what is UNFCCC and what it does, what is its significance? You can start by, you can introduce by starting with UNFCCC. Now, there is a third approach also. Let me write all the approaches. First of all, we have to start with introduction to the answer, and our introduction, we can start it in multiple ways. As I told, first is you can start with COP, Conference of Parties. Second is you can start with UNFCCC. And third thing is you can make reference to the recent schedule of COP 27, which is going to be organized in Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. So you can start with COP 27 in particular. Here you can start with COP in general. What is COP? Okay. And another alternative is to start with the current affairs reference, giving the current reference of schedule of COP 27 to be held in Egyptian city of Sharm el-Sheikh. So these are the three ways you can introduce this answer. And as I told yesterday also, you can use multiple approaches. So you can write COP plus UNFCCC. You can define COP and then mention COP 27. So let us see how to write the introduction. As we know that Conference of Parties is the supreme decision-making body of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So we can directly start with Conference of Parties. Let me rub the question. Okay, let it be there. So we can start our answer with Conference of Parties. Conference of Parties, COP, is the highest decision-making body, highest decision-making body of UNFCCC, in which signatory countries participate. So first of all, we defined what is COP. COP is the highest decision-making body of UNFCCC, in which the countries which are signatory of UNFCCC, they participate. So we can also mention that currently there are 198 members of UNFCCC. We can mention that. Currently UNFCCC has 198 members. So now it will serve as an introduction to our answer, and it is directly associated with what the question is asking. Question is in a specific reference to COPs. So we have directly started with COPs and said that COP is the highest decision-making body of UNFCCC, in which signatory countries participate, and presently there are 198 members of UNFCCC. Other way around was that you could have written that COP 27 is scheduled to be organized in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. That would also be a good introduction. Apart from that, if you are very good in map, though it is very unlikely that we know the geographical locations of all the important cities and the territorial outlines of all countries, but if you are very good in map, you can also draw a map of Egypt, and you can also draw a map of Egypt, and you can show the city of Sharm el-Sheikh. So here the city of Sharm el-Sheikh is located. In map you can plot a map representing Egypt and locating the city of Sharm el-Sheikh, and here you can write COP 27. Here you can write COP 27. Okay, and here you can write Egypt. Okay, so it will make a good value addition to your answer. Okay, it will make a good value addition. So, and also if you know the adjoining geographical features like Mediterranean Sea to the north of Egypt, and then this is the Red Sea. Okay, and it is the Gulf of Suez. So if you represent the map of Egypt and locate Sharm el-Sheikh and write COP 27, so it will be also a very good value addition to your answer as far as introduction is concerned. The examiner will be happy that you are aware where the next COP is going to be organized. So fine, this was the introduction part. Now let us come to what the question is asking, key takeaways from the previous COPs. Now you see that already 26 conference of parties has been organized till last year, and now this year 27th COP is going to be held. So we cannot write all the key takeaways from all 26 COPs. We have to select certain COPs which had historical significance, which had which were of very prominent importance as far as global climate action is concerned. So we have to take only those conference of parties in the history of UNFCCC which hold historical significance. So can you name some of them? When was the first conference of parties organized under UNFCCC? Can any one of you tell? Puranji, hello, good evening very much, all of you. So please tell me that when the first COP conference of parties under UNFCCC was organized. So the right answer is in Berlin in 1995. So the first COP conference of parties under UNFCCC, which was itself signed in the year 1992, and the first conference of parties was held in the German city of Berlin in 1995. Fine. Now kindly note down the introduction. You can have a good reference to this, to how to start answering questions like this. Okay, fine. Now see that the question is asking key takeaways. Key takeaway means important achievements. Now we have 26 COPs. So we have to only include those COPs in our answer which were of historical significance. For example, the 1997 Kyoto. Okay, so as we know that COP3, it was held in 1997, Kyoto, Japan. Now we can start our answer. Key takeaways from previous COPs. I would always request you to make subheadings in your answers so that it will also provide you a clear approach how to write answer, what to write in that particular subheading, as well as maintain your answer within the prescribed word limit. So it keeps a control on the word limit also. Always have the practice of writing your answers in subheadings. So key takeaways from previous COPs. As it is asking in the historical context, so the first point we can write is that first conference of parties, first COP was held in Berlin 1995. Okay. Afterwards till now 26 COPs has been organized. 26 COPs has been organized, and some of them have significant historical importance. As the question is asking, key takeaways means important achievements. Some of them have significant historical takeaways. Okay, fine. Now we can mention Kyoto Protocol was a very important conference of party organized in 1997, the third conference of parties, in which it was made obligatory on the industrialized economies or the Western developed countries to curtail and restrict their greenhouse gas emission. So Kyoto Protocol was a landmark agreement in the history of global greenhouse gas emission. We must mention that. So we can write Kyoto Protocol adopted in 1997. You can mention in brackets COP3. Committed industrialized countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Another important point under COP third was introduction of common but differentiated responsibility, which was known as CBDR. Common but differentiated responsibility. Introduction of the concept of common but differentiated responsibility. You can write in short CBDR, differentiated responsibility. The concept of CBDR was implemented under COP3 in the Kyoto Protocol, which made certain commitments, which demanded certain commitments from the developed nations to restrict their greenhouse gas emission. At the same time, it made some non-binding commitments from the developing countries also, putting the developed countries and the developing countries into two different annexes. Okay? So this is CBDR, introduction of the concept of CBDR. Now, as I told you, we have to always keep the word limit in our mind and only mention those conference of parties which had historical significance. Coming to the third important historical conference of parties, I hope that you have noted it down, and I request you to kindly note it down. Now, coming to the next point, coming to the next important conference of parties, and can any of you tell me, in the recent memory, there was a very important historical agreement on climate action, and it is very famous, and the current global climate action is also coordinated on the goals of that particular agreement. Yes, I am talking about the Paris Climate Deal. The Paris Climate Deal was signed under COP21. COP21 was held in Paris, France. So the Paris Climate Deal, or the COP21, which resulted in Paris Treaty, it made, so there was an agreement, and the member countries, they agreed to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions so that the global warming is restricted to 2 degrees C compared to the pre-industrial level. So that was a very significant takeaway from the COP21. So we can mention COP21 that resulted in Paris Treaty in 2015. The third point is COP21 resulted in Paris Treaty, and always remember, you have to write in short sentences in your answers. Short sentences are lucid and they are easy to read and understand for the examiner also, and it also makes a very good writing style. So always try to write in short and simple sentences. So COP21 resulted in Paris Treaty, full stop. Member nations or member parties agreed to limit increase in global temperature to 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. That was a very significant takeaway compared to pre-industrial levels. See, I am writing all these points only to make you understand how to write answers in general studies, and the very purpose of this answer writing improvement program is to practice one question daily based upon current affairs so that you are habitual of answer writing. You should not face any difficulty while you write in the actual main exam. Now, coming to the answer, member parties agreed to limit increase in global temperature to 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial level. Ideally, they agreed that it should be within 1.5 degrees C. This thing also you can mention. Ideally, to keep temperature increase within 1.5 degrees Celsius. To keep temperature increase within 1.5 degree Celsius. So it was a very significant outcome of the COP21. Now, can you tell me very recent happening of COP26 in Glasgow, United Kingdom, in which Glasgow Climate Pact came out, And Glasgow Climate Pact was also very significant due to its various takeaways. So the next point will be COP26. Okay. I hope that you have already noted down COP21 and the resulting takeaway. We have to maintain our complete focus on the question, what is being asked in the question. Question is very clear about key takeaways from previous COPs. So as I told you, there were 26 COPs in the past, and in the answer, given the word limit, we cannot write important takeaways from all the 26 COPs. So only we have to take examples of such COPs in which historical agreements were signed. Now, in COP26, Conference of Parties 26 in Glasgow, UK. In Glasgow, UK. COP26 held in 2021. In 21, resulted in Glasgow Climate Pact. Glasgow Climate Pact. And you have to also mention the important takeaway. One takeaway is that it resulted in Glasgow Climate Pact. If you wish, you can also underline the important keywords in your answers. So the important takeaway was Glasgow Climate Pact and agreement over, the parties agreed over, agreement over phasing down of coal. Agreement over phasing down of coal. This was an important takeaway from the Glasgow COP27. So it was agreed that the coal industry fossil fuel usage, particularly coal usage, should be reduced and should be phased down. There was a very crucial controversy at that point of time because polluters like China, India, which are also major emitters, so they objected the term phasing out. Glasgow Climate Pact. So many countries were, and particularly the low-lying island countries were pushing for complete phasing out of coal from economy. But India and China, developing countries like India, they were not in favor of complete phasing out of coal, and they agreed for a reduced and diluted form of use of coal, that was phasing down of coal in the coming years. So this was an important takeaway, agreement over phasing down of coal, which further resulted into controversy also. So now we already have noted down 4 important COPs and the resulting takeaway. So now let us come to the other part of the question, the second sub part of the question. What is the second sub part of the question? The second sub part is asking about critically discuss India's contribution. In the first sub part, we had to only discuss, and wherever the tail word is discussed, you have to write in some detail the important aspects what the question is asking on. You have to just write in detail. You have to write the features, you have to write the various information you have about that particular aspect asked in the question. The second part, the tail word is critically discuss. Now, you have to discuss but in a critical fashion. Means your orientation should be more critical, your attitude to the subject should be critical, means more critical point should comprise your answer. For example, if I say that if you are including 5 points or 6 points, so 4 points should be normally critical points. If I give you in number or figure, so 70-75% content should be critical. 70-75% points should be of critical nature. So now let's see how to write it. It is asking the question, the second subpart is asking critically discuss India's contribution in the COPs in the last decade. So it is very specific about its demand. You have to write particularly India's contribution in the COPs only in the past 10 years. Okay. So again, let's have a subheading, India's contribution in the COPs in the last decade. So this is the subheading you should form. You can also have your own subheading, but it should be directly related to what the question is asking, and in my opinion it is a short subheading so that you can remain focused on the demand of the question. So what was India's contribution? As we know that India was a very crucial and important participant in the Paris Treaty. India, along with major developed countries like US, UK and France. And also India lobbied with developing countries to bring attention to the problem of global climate change and the prospects of renewable energy on the during the course of negotiations in the COP21. So India, along with 197 members, you can write first of all India's contribution, but again you have to be mindful of the tail word critically discuss. So first of all we will write India's contribution in a positive perspective, then we will see the critical aspects in the following points. First of all, in COP21, India along with 197 countries, decided to cut emissions up to restrict global temperature rise up to 1.5 degrees Celsius, compared to pre-industrial levels, as we had just discussed. So this was an important contribution of India, that India was also a significant negotiator in the COP21. Second thing is that India lobbied for the creation of an international solar alliance whose headquarters is also established in India, and that was also initiated in the COP21. India's contribution in campaigning for an international solar alliance, which eventually was established and its headquarters is located in India, International Solar Alliance. So this was an important contribution of India in the COP21 Paris. Now let us see, after Paris there was an important COP26 which was organized last year, and India's role was also very pivotal in COP26. India's role was both positive and negative, and some of its stands were also criticized by the developed countries. So now let us come to COP26. It was about Paris. We have to focus mainly on the important conference of parties, because otherwise we will have to write down a lot and we have the restriction of word limit. Now in Glasgow 26, COP26, India made 5 Panchamrit commitments or pledges. In Glasgow COP26, India made Panchamrit pledges or commitments. See, while we prepare for mains exam, we also at the same time study for prelims. So in Glasgow, India made Panchamrit pledges or commitment. So it can be in the form of a statement asked in the prelims exam. Other than that, we are reading about conference of parties. You should be mindful that how many conference of parties under the aegis of UNFCCC has been organized in India. Can any one of you tell? Good evening Sachin and good evening Rajguru, both of you most welcome to our class. And this is second class of answer writing improvement program in English. Most of you, okay, yeah, good evening to all of you. So now, as I was discussing about how to read the same question from the prelims perspective. As I told you, conference of parties, how many times it has been organized in India? Can any one of you tell? See, COP8, Conference of Parties 8, held in 2002, was organized in New Delhi, India. Always remember this thing. And this was the only time, single instance, when Conference of Parties of UNFCCC was organized in India. So it is an important point from the perspective of prelims exam. COP8 in 2002 was organized in New Delhi, India. Was organized in New Delhi, India. But you cannot write this fact in your answer, in the present answer. because it is limiting to a particular time span of the last decade, and it was in 2002. If the question was about in the last 2 decades, then you could have included that India also had organized COP, Conference of Parties, in 2002 in New Delhi. But it is a crucial information with respect to the prelims exam. Only on single instance COP was organized in India, COP 8, and that too in the year 2002. Now coming to this question, in Glasgow COP 26, India made Panchamrit pledges or commitment. So let us write few examples. For example, India committed that our energy requirements, 50% of energy requirements will be met from renewable energy by 2020. That was one of the Panchamrit commitment. Second Panchamrit commitment was that India's energy capacity will be, non-fossil energy capacity will be 500 gigawatt by the year 2030. So you can write few of these. For example, India's non-fossil energy capacity, to be 500 gigawatt by 2030. So this was one of the 5 Panchamrit commitments. Second important commitment, you can write net zero emission by 2070. Net zero emission by 2070. So these were some of the important contributions India made in the previous Conference of Parties. Now, as you see that we have to critically discuss in this question 2 positive contributions we have written. As I told you, in the sub part or the entire question, wherever the critical aspect is to be written, so 70% of the content should be critical. Okay? So now 2 points we have written in the positive context. Now come to the critical points. We have made positive references about India's contribution in COP 21 and COP 26. Now coming to the critical aspect, we can write India is the 3rd largest emitter. India is the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases. We know after China and US, India is the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases. And these important piece of facts you should essentially include in your answer. India is the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, or you can skip in the world, it is understood, and that's how you frame short sentences. India is the 3rd largest GHG emitter. It is criticized for not making ambitious commitments, in COPs, in Conference of Parties. As we have to write critical aspect of India's contribution in COPs, so we can write this critical aspect, and particularly Western countries are more vocal about this thing. They say that given the proportion of India's emissions, India is the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter, India is not making ambitious commitments in the Conference of Parties. So this is the first critical aspect of India's contribution. Now the second thing is, and this criticism is majorly heaped by the low-lying nations and the island nations as well as the developing countries. India's stand on phasing down of coal, instead of phasing out. Phasing down of coal instead of phasing out is criticized for obstructing green economic growth. We know that due to climate change and global warming, temperature rise, green economic growth. We know that there is a constant threat to the low-lying nations and island nations, the littoral nations, due to rise in sea levels. And also severe climatic incidents are occurring, phenomena are occurring. So there is a global demand for cutting completely phasing out of coal. And this was a major contentious point in the COP26 negotiations. India and China, they came together along with other developing countries and said that no, means all of a sudden we cannot phase out coal as a fuel which drives the economy. We are a developing country and we have our own energy demands. So we can phase down coal. And it was a major controversy. So in context of India's contribution in COP26, we can write it as a critical point that India's stand on phasing out of coal was criticized by various parties. So this was the second thing. Now coming to, this was the third point. Now coming to the fourth point. Fourth point is that all the commitments India is making afresh, apart from the NDCs, nationally determined contributions. The critics say that India will already achieve those targets with its current level of climate action. And the new announcement or the commitments made by India will not reduce future emissions significantly, what India commits at the stage of COPs, Conference of Parties. So it is again a critical aspect of India's contribution to the COP. Let us write it, that India will already achieve climate goals at its current level of climate action, And there are facts coming up which says that the pace at which India is moving towards the climate goals which has to be met by the year 2030. So at the stage of the present commitments itself, India can meet these targets. Okay? So level of climate action. But new commitments made by India, we can write, new commitment made by India would not significantly reduce future emission. Okay? So commitments in COPs, commitments in Conference of Parties by India would not significantly reduce future emissions. So this is again an important critical point. So as we saw that we had to critically discuss India's contribution. So we had two positive aspects of its contribution in the past decade, and we particularly limited ourselves to the Conference of Parties of the last decade only. So India will already achieve climate goal at its current level of climate action, but new commitments made by India in Conference of Parties would not significantly reduce India's future emissions. So this is an important criticism that is made. Now, we have to conclude our answer. As we saw that we have addressed both the subparts of the question, making some map and also including some facts, also including some data with respect to India's present status of emission. So how to conclude? Always understand one thing, that your conclusion should be on a hopeful note. You should not be pessimistic in your conclusion. Okay, so it gives the examiner a view that you are a person of optimistic attitude towards issues. So we can write, and we can conclude with the current context of COP27, that because the question is on Conference of Parties, we can write COP27 negotiations will focus on efforts to decarbonize, and you must know what is the agenda of the next Conference of Parties. Then only you can write efforts to decarbonize, finance climate action, focus on food security, etc. These are the agendas of the upcoming Conference of Parties to be held in Sharm el-Sheikh, COP27. So COP27 negotiations will focus on efforts to decarbonize, finance climate action, focus on food security, etc. And what is the major contention which is still pending and carried on from the previous conference of parties? That is the issue of global financing of climate efforts. So as we know that developed countries had committed to provide an annual climate fund of $100 billion per year, which has till today not met. So what India is expecting that in COP27, that commitment by developed countries will be met. So we can also include that in our conclusion. India hopes that annual $100 billion climate fund pledge to developing countries will be fulfilled soon. Now you see that how many words we have put in the introduction, in the conclusion. So it is about 25-26 words. So as I told you, the conclusion should not be more than 25-30 words. Okay? Now, talking about the conclusion, we have also brought in the perspective of the next COP27. So what is the agenda? That is how you write a good answer. You must know the agenda of the upcoming conference of party also. As I told, so focus will be on efforts to decarbonize the economy as well as finance climate action. There should be focus on food security, biodiversity and all these aspects. Other than that, what is the remaining contentious issue and what we are hopeful about? India is hopeful that the pledged climate fund of $100 billion per year by the developed countries to the developing countries will be finalized and fulfilled soon. So this is how you will conclude this answer. I hope that you have understood how to write the answer of this question, and I eagerly wait for any of your queries or any doubts you have with regard to the today's session. So I request you to have, if you have any of your doubts and queries, kindly write in comment and I will try to address them. If you have any queries, I am waiting for your queries. If you have any query with regard to the today's question. Okay, fine. So I hope that today's session has benefited you. If you have any query, you can write in the comments afterwards also. I will try to address them. And thank you so much for joining today's session. The session will continue on a daily basis in English medium, and daily we will bring you important, relevant questions related to current affairs and how to write them. We will try to attempt real-time writing of answers, which is a very major problematic area for civil service aspirants. So thank you so much for joining this session. Thanks a lot.